to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into the rookies. Welcome to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, and tonight we are going to be talking about, obviously, the NFL draft, but we're going over the craziness of the weekend and everything that goes along with it. I know a lot of people are are a little down after the draft, and maybe their favorite players didn't have the best landing spot, or maybe their least favorite players did, and a little bit of everything in between. But we're going to cover all that tonight while we're mocking and having all kinds of fun with it in this rookie draft spectacular. But first, let's bring on the boys. We got Andy rejoining. Hopefully, I think he was having some issues here, but I think he's with us now. How are you guys doing? Are you ready for the rookie draft spectacular?
Always.
I am ready.
Very much ready, yes. But no, always ready. And this year's draft, admittedly not the strongest draft by any means, right? But should still be a fun bunch of players, fun draft for us to break down.
Yeah, I was obviously excited for the draft because hopefully, the crazy takes will be over. But I feel like, this draft with the players involved, unfortunately, the talent level, once you get past if you can even call it the top tier, elite tier, the draft wasn't going to make it any better. So, we're still seeing people, trying to hype up these guys that are inevitably going to be second round picks that I have never been excited about. And after the draft, I'm still not excited about, unfortunately. But we're still going to do the draft. Everyone's got to do their draft, so we got to talk about them still.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I was working on everything for the website, updating the Sleeper draft tool, and basically the tool follows along with your rookie draft on Sleeper, and the next best players are and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of wild because I try to put ADP into it, and obviously there's really no ADP right now, so I'm just basing it off of those ranks. Essentially, like I'm trying to go to like major site rankings just to use that as ADP, and it's just absolutely wild because like if you were using Beth grades, you might say, hey, like I'm gonna do I'm gonna take this person now, and if you're going off consensus, you might say, okay, I'm gonna wait around. And I think that's why I like the sleeper draft tool, because it's pretty cool because you kind of get a best of both worlds, but it's wild in them streets, let's just put it that way. But that is enough about that. It was there was a lot of surprises in the draft. There was a lot to a lot to hope for, a lot to see. And I mean, was there anything that truly surprised you guys from the draft? Obviously there was I don't know that anyone like truly like blew my socks off or anything like that with where they were drafted, but obviously there was a couple players that I wish they would have gone maybe a little earlier, wish they would have gone to a little bit better of a landing spot. But is there anyone in particular I cannot believe this happened or that happened?
Well, for me, I really thought Eric McAllister would get drafted just based on his talent. I know he had the foot fracture on his pro day, and that's obviously going to hurt draft stock, but just, I would have figured somebody on day 3 would have taken a stab at him just to get him, in their training camp and have, the right of first refusal with him. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The injury, maybe teams know more about it than we do. Maybe there's going to be some more setbacks that we haven't seen before. He is obviously an older prospect as well, who's had somewhat of a checkered past that maybe teams just didn't want to deal with. But, talent-wise, I think we're talking about probably at least a top 10 receiver in this class, production talent-wise. And this guy doesn't get drafted while I feel like everybody that caught a pass for Texas Tech is getting drafted, even though we're not really excited about any of those guys. So that part didn't really make sense to me. But I would say that's the biggest snub of the draft. The biggest surprise would be all these tight ends that went on day two. A lot of them that Devy, C2C guys never even really. We didn't talk about them at all because some of them just weren't even pass catchers. Now, that happens quite a bit. I know I threw a couple names out in our chat, like, the Tip Rymans of the world, who just get drafted a little bit earlier, but it seemed like there was a lot more of that this year. So I'm interested to see what these NFL teams do with those guys, because from a prospect perspective, they weren't showing that they were going to be like huge offensive weapons.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And some other thoughts for me is just overall crazy drafting. For example, I mean, just a couple of teams, but one team that does it year after year, and not to go in on this entire team, but I mean, what is the front office doing for the 49ers? I mean, the San Francisco 49ers, year after year, they're swinging and missing on guys. This is every skill possession player that the 49ers have drafted on day two in the Shanahan era. Now, this year, Dejon Stribling, Cameron Latu, Tyrion Davis-Price, Danny Gray, Trey Sermon, Debo Samuel was a hit, Jalen Hurd, Dante Pettis. And they also reached on a running back in this class as well, Kalen Black. And I just am always confused. There's clearly they are just believing, oh, yeah, we know how to identify talent better than everybody else, but it's not playing out that way. So I just think it's crazy every year, the reaches that, for example, that team is making. Overall thoughts on the draft, I did think that there were still some juicy landing spots, but also some underwhelming ones where we may have to wait a year or two. But that's okay. That's what Dynasty's about. We need to be patient with these guys. We understand that not everybody can be a superstar year one. As far as rookies coming in, and usually it takes a while for them to actually gain some consistency in their footing. So by the end of the season, yes, we expect to see a lot more, but yes, from a landing spot standpoint, it's all over the place. I can't wait to get into this mock with you guys.
Now, that's a great point about the 49ers. I don't know what they're doing. Somebody posted, years, and essentially their only hit in the second or third round is Debo. And I mean, that was early second, if I remember correctly. So, that's, I don't even know if that truly counts. Like they might have just gotten lucky there. Yeah, it's like, everyone, they're like Aaron was saying, like they're trying to, we know better than you do, but that's also, I could do it at, you don't need to do it at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, if you can make it through. And did I cut out? Uh-oh. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
I was hoping it was just me, but it sounds like Aaron's seeing the same thing that I am. Yeah, it looks like you're cutting in and out a little bit.
All right, sorry about that. Hopefully it'll fix itself. Unfortunately, I just restarted my computer and everything. Well, hopefully it'll get better. We'll see what happens. But enough about that. Why don't we dive into the rookie mock? I think this is going to be fun. We have not talked about any of these players. We have not talked about we have not discussed anything since the end of the draft. So this will be fun to see how this. Man, hopefully I'm not. It seems like I'm still lagging, but
A little bit. I think we got the gist of what you're going with there. So Aaron's has the 101. I mean, are we just going to go ahead and kick this thing off?
yeah, we'll get it going here in a second. Sorry, and if it continues being bad, I might have to let Andy or Aaron just talk us through it. I don't know. We'll figure something.
Nobody wants that, but I'll do it. I'll man up and and talk through the draft if I need to. But
Andy can run the talking on the pick to pick basis. I will go 101 here. One of the guys that I've been excited about for 2 years now, if you've listened to this Devy Devotional podcast, that is Jeremiah Love, running back out of Notre Dame, who ended up going in the early first round to the Arizona Cardinals. So that is kind of a questionable pick from just a franchise and a team building standpoint, absolutely. But Jeremiah Love is a talented three down back, and they already have running backs there, but they're more of those like goal line plotting backs. Nobody that has the dynamic nature of Jeremiah Love. So I think he will add something nice to this offense, which actually does have some weapons already. Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. You got at the tight end position, you're pretty loaded there. So, Arizona, yes, they don't have that franchise quarterback who's a stud, but Jacoby Brissett did what he needed to from a fantasy standpoint last year. Just a matter of if that offensive line can improve and just play a little bit better. But Jeremiah Love should get plenty of targets and just rushing volume in that backfield, and ultimately a great dynasty play long term. He is the one-on-one. It's pretty clear in most leagues. I mean, maybe you'll see some variation here or there, but I think everybody wants that next top back.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be close to consensus. I mean, maybe amongst our own people on this pod, there might be some conflict there, but it's not like a big conflict. Obviously, Jeremiah Love is a virtual lock at either the 101, and if you're lucky enough to get him at 102, then you're going to be happy with that as well. He's just looking at the history of top 5 draft capital running backs. They're locked into their workload for years to come, and Jeremiah Love's going to be no different than those guys. But I have the 102, which is obviously going to be a little bit trickier. There's the 3 wide receivers. I think we can safely say it's now down to 2 wide receivers, and then obviously Fernando Mendoza as well. I am going to take my top wide receiver, who I've had since last offseason for sure. But it's going to be Jordan Tyson, who got the top 10 draft capital. He's going to the Saints. Obviously, you've got Olave there, who seems to be the number 1 receiver, but he's got the concussion issues. Whether or not he can stay healthy for a full season is always going to be a concern. And then also you have the quarterback concerns. Is Tyler Shugg a franchise quarterback? I don't think anyone's buying into that just yet. Not saying that it couldn't happen. It just seems very unlikely that it will happen. So how steady and consistent is that passing offense going to be? But obviously here you're going to bet on talent. You're going to bet on the ceiling that the situation improves for him throughout his career. Jordan Tyson, yes, he's got the injury concerns, but I'm just going to go ahead and bet on the talent and take him at 102 here. And I'm sure I'll miss out on some guys that I want here, as John has back-to-back picks, but that's the nature of rookie drafts, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm definitely having some technical issues on my end, so this might be the last time and let Aaron and Andy kind of talk this one out. I did want to ask, I mean, I know you kind of already mentioned this, Aaron, but is there any time where you would say, I'm taking Jordan Tyson over Jeremiah Love here? I think closer than maybe people originally wanted to put them at.
Yeah, there is no scenario where I would ever consider Jordan Tyson above Jeremiah Love. And for me, it's just the injury history there with Jordan Tyson. He is not quite a dynamic enough playmaker in all 3 phases of the field, underneath, intermediate, and deep aspects. And he's just got a little bit too much of a checkered pass there, combining that with some uncertainty there with the quarterback play long term, getting him the ball and having to compete with a Chris Olave, who is also a proven guy in the league. You can say he's great, he's good, whatever the case is. Olave is a very formidable player to play alongside of. So less of a knock on Tyson, though, compared to I think that Jeremiah Love is that special of a back, and that's a difference-making thing in Dynasty. Like, you want these guys who can just dominate from the running back position for years and years and years. I get it's a volatile position, but at the same time, there's volatility with Tyson. So I have no problem with, Andy going with Jordan Tyson at 102 by any means, but for me, he is more of a clear second pick. Jeremiah Love, I'm going 101 every day, all day, and that includes in super flex formats, right?
And it looks like we do have a quick question from the chat here. On the clock, 270 Academy. Malachi Tony or Jadarian Price in a Devy / rookie mock. I'm going Jadarian Price. He's got first round draft capital. He was up in my RB2. I know Malachi Tony's getting hyped up as this Jeremiah Love almost level, or Jeremiah Smith level prospect. I don't think that that's the case for him right now. He's kind of in like the Casey Concepcion level of his career arc. Whether or not he can complete that arc and be a dynamic, versatile receiver will remain to be seen, because as of right now, he's kind of being used one-dimensionally. He does it very well. I'm not knocking him. I think he's a great player, but there are other things that I want to see out of Tony before I want to bet that much on him, when I already know Jadarian Price has a first-round draft capital as a rookie running back, and this is a Devy league, so you're not going to get any of those points that Malachi Tony's scoring in college.
Yeah, that's the kicker there, right? C to C, much different concept. I would definitely take Malachi Tony with the dominance that he will put up production-wise at Miami if this was a C to C league, but it's not. Just a Devy league where that guy sits on your roster for 2 years, maybe 3 years, and then hopefully translates to the NFL level and hopefully, lands in a good system and actually produces way in the future. So I'll take the Jadarian Price with the round 1 draft capital. Pretty nice landing spot there at Seattle. So yes, I will take him. And I see that John has put a pick in the draft. I might as well announce it while I'm talking here, and that is Carnell Tate at 103. John's going Carnell Tate, who is, just a very, very well-rounded wide receiver, and a little bit overshadowed, unfortunately, just with his teammate being so generational there in Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. So Carnell Tate going in the early first round, the 4th overall pick in the draft to the Tennessee Titans. That just seems like a juicy pick. Like, I absolutely love it. I could actually see myself taking him ahead of Jordan Tyson just because he's a little bit cleaner from a injury standpoint. He's going to be set up for success. I think Cam Ward is definitely going to lock into Carnell Tate and pepper him early and often.
Yeah, and the Titans are obviously saying, but with this pick, like, hey, this is going to be our guy. Like, we're investing a very, very premium draft pick on him. Whereas, the guys last year, Alec Aomanor, who we obviously liked for various reasons, but he's a 4th-round pick, and then also Kamir Dike, another 4th-round pick. Neither of those guys are scaring any of us off of Carnell Tate, so he finally gets his chance to be the guy, which... Yeah, I would say 103 right now. Like I said, we're down to like the top 2 wide receivers in their tier. Carnell Tate was obviously the other guy I was talking about. But at 104, he's going to take Fernando Mendoza, the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. This is obviously super flex, so quarterbacks come at a premium. I don't have anything bad to say about Mendoza. I think he had a great season. It wasn't a stellar season. It wasn't like a Joe Burrow record-setting season, or even like a Cam Ward season that he had last year. I always viewed Fernando Mendoza as a guy who is going to be probably like a career low-end QB1, maybe high-end QB2, that's a position that you need on a dynasty roster, and he could probably do that for the better part of a decade. So you're getting that at 104. You're locking down your super flex spot on your team for the foreseeable future. You can't really be angry at that, especially in this draft class where a lot of these players don't have this sky high ceiling. Fernando Mendoza just makes the most sense here at 104.
Yeah, absolutely. Fernando Mendoza having a great season. We know that he broke out last year at Indiana, leading them to that national championship win through 41 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. And he takes pretty good care of the ball overall. And he certainly has a good balance of ability with his arm, but also with some legs, right? Being able to gain some yards. He's not a dynamic rusher by any means, especially when it translates to the NFL level. But, he'll be able to score some touchdowns. Think of like what Jackson Dart did as like a willing runner at least last year. I'm not saying that's a perfect comp by any means, but at 6'4", 236 pounds, Fernando Mendoza, he is built to be able to handle hits at the NFL level. And unfortunately, the Raiders, it's not a perfect landing spot, but they do have Brock Bowers. They have Ashton Jeanty. They're building some things there offensively, and I think they might be a year away from even getting some more targets, because next year's wide receiver class is pretty loaded. It's got very solid high end guys towards the top, but also a lot of depth within the class itself. So that's really the I guess optimism we need to have with Mendoza as well, is they likely will build around him, give him some weapons here. Let's just hope that doesn't break him year one, being part of maybe a lackluster offense there in Las Vegas.
Absolutely. That brings it back to me at 105. This is where I view, I guess, the end of comfortability. And honestly, I don't even know if I'm that comfortable with Mekhi Lemon anymore. But he does. He's the obvious pick for me at 105. There are obviously some issues that I have. Whether John's brought up, he doesn't get, or all of his targets come in the center of the field. Like he's not an outside threat at all. I don't know what the how we can apply that, if it's applicable to his NFL success. I haven't looked into it enough, but he from what I've seen, like he can run the deep routes. He's obviously very good underneath of the short route stuff, and he has had a great last two seasons. So I'm gonna take Mekhi Lemon. He's going to Philadelphia, who we all assume is going to move on from AJ Brown. Devontae Smith, I don't think anyone's thinking that he's ever going to be the number one guy at Philadelphia. But Philadelphia is also an offense that kind of took a big step back in their passing game with the development of whatever happened with AJ Brown after they got him there. So is Mekhi Lemon going to be better for a quarterback like Jalen Hurts? I think maybe. Like he's kind of like a safer underneath guy versus what maybe AJ Brown's skill set was. But there's obviously a risk there. Like, is he going to end up being like a Hollywood Brown type or something like that, where you never really quite see the wide receiver one level season? But in this draft class, I think that it's the pick that you have to make at 105.
I'm hoping that I'm back and it seems to have calmed down. If it starts acting up again, I guess let me know and I'll take myself out again. But I have to. I have to disagree with your DVS take there. I think he is a wide receiver one, and I think the Eagles view him as a wide receiver one, or else they wouldn't be making the AJ Brown trade. And I think Mekhi Lemon is a solid two, and I've been saying that for the longest time now. While everyone was trying to push him up to wide receiver one in the class, I was like, he
Oh,
fits Philly well.
It's too bad we lost John just as he's about to try and prove me wrong. No, you got your point across. Yes, Devontae Smith is good. He's a Heisman winner. Maybe it's just the nature of that offense too, like whether or not Jalen Hurts can manifest a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase level season in any of his wide receivers. So that I kind of look at Mekhi the same way. Like I don't think he's ever going to have like a Jackson Smith and Jigba or Amon-Ra St. Brown level season, but it's possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and take him at 105.
Yeah, no, I like the pick there. I would have taken him at 105 as well, or would have been pretty excited if he fell to me at 106. Mekhi Lemon, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because I think, Andy, you were higher on Mekhi Lemon, during the season, and by the end of the season, I really came around to him as a player. And I know he's doing that work over the middle, right? He is making some tough catches there. He's good after with the ball in his hand, running and trying to gain some yards with the ball in his hand. But he actually led the class per who was it? Established the Run podcast that I listened to here post draft, and he actually led the class in 20+ yard receptions down the field. So it's like, to call him some sort of like underneath, just a little slot receiver, he is not that, right? He's no Zachariah Branch. Like Mekhi Lemon is capable of making big enough plays. At the end of the day, yes, he thrives a little bit more in the middle of the field. That's not where Jalen Hurts is going to necessarily pass a ton, at least to this point in his career, but he's kind of a unique talent that might change things for Hurts overall. So I don't like it, assuming that A.J. Brown does get traded, which sounds pretty imminent at this point. So I like Mekhi Lemon there. I'm going to go to 106. I go another wide receiver here. Wide receiver that, on paper, the landing spot is not the best, but that's Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M, now landing with the Browns. He went in the first round of the NFL draft at the 24th overall pick, and overall, I mean, he was a guy who he can do it all as far as, like underneath for sure. He's really, really proficient in those intermediate and underneath passes, but from a deep standpoint, this guy actually showed he can win there this last year when he transferred into Texas A&M and showed he could put up some numbers in the SEC. He's a solid athlete, that's for sure. At end of the day, I mean, he's a good separator. He can run very solid routes with his quickness, his burst, all those things. And I think he has good hands. He's had some drop issues, yes, but we know that that's not necessarily always on the player themselves. It's not sticky year to year, and it's not something that's going to keep him off the field. They obviously drafted him in the first because they need more playmaking weapons, and Casey Concepcion should be targeted. I don't care if it's Shadur Sanders. I don't care if it's Deshaun Watson. They're going to get him some easy touches and also potentially some big plays within that offense, and he injects some life into it for sure. I'm not going to say I don't have any concerns about the Browns landing spot because we just know how those players have struggled through the years, but I do think that Casey Concepcion can at least make a pretty big impact for their team and a solid enough impact, at least like a wide receiver 2 impact for your fantasy teams, for example.
Yeah, the Browns continue to do, you mentioned the 49ers earlier. The Browns, they're drafting players we like, but they're also doing strange things like taking Casey Concepcion and then Denzel Boston 15 picks later or whatever it was. But that Denzel Boston pick shouldn't scare you off of KC. He's the more talented wide receiver. I mentioned him earlier when I was talking about Malachi Toney. He did grow throughout his college career when he moved to Texas A&M. He showed that he can be a versatile receiver. He can do the downfield stuff just as eloquently as he did the slot stuff when he was at NC State. And he's a first round early declare. Those tend to hit at a higher rate than a lot of other, if you're just looking at two things, first round early declare, it generally works out well for those players. Yes, the Browns are a scary landing spot, but the Browns have produced good wide receiver seasons throughout their history as a franchise, so it's not unheard of. Whether or not he becomes like an all-pro wide receiver throughout his career at Cleveland, that would be a bit of an anomaly for that franchise. But that's not what we're doing here. We don't scout the helmets. A lot of things can happen in an NFL career. I think you just have to bet on the talent at this part in the draft, as any part of the draft, really. And Casey Concepcion is the next best guy that you can take. So I love it at 106.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go to 107 here. At 107, I'm going to draft Jadarian Price, running back, who went in the end of the first round to the Seattle Seahawks. And I understand that it's not the most promising list of players that have gone in maybe that late first category, or when you take all the running backs who've been drafted with day 1 or day 2 draft capital, and you look at like the low volume guys right on that list, it's not a very promising list. Like it's littered with busts, absolutely. But how many of those players have played behind a caliber of player like Jeremiah Love? So Jadarian Price is coming out of Notre Dame as the 1B option to Jeremiah Love. And while Love was the better player, absolutely, he was the main receiving component, Jadarian Price was still an effective rusher. He still was scoring touchdowns at a high rate. He has return versatility and experience. At the end of the day, Jadarian Price has just enough size where I think he could carve out a very solid workload. As Seattle, I mean, they have to, they needed to address the running back position because Seattle just does not have healthy guys right now. Zach Charbonnet, he's coming off, a torn ACL. Kenneth Walker's gone. They have George Halani. That's not a feature back, right? He's not a guy who's going to be a reliable starter at the NFL level, even though he can play in spurts. So Jadarian Price made some sense. I mean, it's a reach, right? From a roster building standpoint, I don't love drafting a borderline running back like that in the first round, but I think it gives him opportunity. They clearly intend to give him a lot of touches, and though they've had some frustrating usage of running backs over the last year or two in Seattle, there's just no choice. They're going to have to give Jadarian Price a pretty big workload from day one. He has a solid enough athletic profile where I think he'll be able to hold down the job. Even Zach Charbonnet coming back. Hey, I love Sharbs and the idea of him, but coming off of a major injury, and he already was a little bit on that plotter-ish type of spectrum, I think that Jadarian Price should be able to hold down that job for Seattle. This season, maybe going into future seasons as well. So in kind of a down class, or at least a down second half of the first round, I think he makes a lot of sense here, both in redraft formats, but especially in some of these dynasty formats like we're doing tonight for this draft.
Yeah, and John has chimed in from backstage saying he would have taken Jadarian Price ahead of Casey Concepcion, which I don't think I would be upset with anyone who does that. And Jadarian Price, you mentioned Charbonnet's injury. That was a torn ACL in January. So, the ACL timetable can be a little bit wishy-washy, but let's say like November before he's like fully 100%. That's looking on the bright side of things. So, yes, Jadarian Price is going to get a long look at a solid workload for this team. And Charbonnet, he's never been a guy who's going to come in and be the 1A anyhow. So they're obviously telling us by using this first round pick that, we want this guy to be on our team for potentially the next 5 seasons and be that guy who can carry the load. And if that's how the team feels and you're getting a guy who's getting 15 to 20 touches consistently, yes, you're going to want to spend your first round picks on those type of players. And Jadarian Price, although not nearly as exciting as Jeremiah Love, is definitely the second most exciting running back for me in this class, which isn't saying too much, but he didn't do anything to make me say, well, I'm not sure that he's going to be, a great NFL running back, which it seems like he has enough to be a very good running back in for the Seahawks for many years to come. And then, investing that first round draft capital only kind of solidifies that idea. But 108 is kind of an easy one for me. I know I'll be sniping John here. And that's Omar Cooper, who was another first round pick going to the Jets. Another iffy landing spot. Obviously, you have Garrett Wilson there, who, because of that landing spot, has never really had, these far and away wide receiver, top 5 wide receiver season. He may have had a top 5 season, but he's never had Jamar Chase level success, which I know that's a high ceiling, but that's kind of what people were expecting when they got Garrett Wilson out of the draft a few years ago. So he's obviously going to be stuck behind him, and then Geno Smith throwing the ball. We saw what happened in Oakland. Wasn't exactly great for any of the wide receivers there, but at the same time, those wide receivers weren't as talented as Omar Cooper and Garrett Wilson. So maybe there's some improvement there from Geno Smith, which will translate into a solid season for Cooper. But at Indiana, he's just been a solid, consistent guy for the last 2 seasons. Great from a yards per route run standpoint. Had a solid market share despite playing with Surratt and Charlie Becker, who's coming back there, who we love. And he's a red zone threat. That's who Fernando Mendoza was looking for to score touchdowns. So hopefully that's the same case when he suits up for the Jets as well.
Yeah, I have no qualms whatsoever with that pick. I did consider selecting Omar Cooper Jr. there, but I think just going to the New York Jets, it's such a gross landing spot, right? But we have to project out further than just this season. And even this season, I know Geno Smith, he's mostly washed at this point, but I think he'll be able to get some targets his way. And I don't know. I'm not a big Cade Klubnik fan. He also got drafted later on to the New York Jets. That doesn't give me any more confidence this season for Omar Cooper to get involved. But at the end of the day, you got to trust in the talent, trust that long term he can be an important player for them. And no matter what happens with Garrett Wilson, if he stays healthy, injured, gets traded, moves on, otherwise, I mean, Omar Cooper Jr. should be locked up there for years to come in New York. So at this point in the draft, might as well lock him in at that 108. I like the pick, Andy. And John is here at the 109, 10. He's saying that there is a big, giant tier break here. So I think it's a challenging spot to select and draft from. I will say if you can trade up within the first 8 picks, I mean, that's a really nice place to be. Maybe you like those top tight ends or maybe some other player there where you're comfortable staying in that late first range. But if you can make a move up, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe you can trade one of these late picks for a first next year. I don't know if that's possible. It might be possible in your leagues. A lot of leagues where I'm in, people are not wanting those late first, but hey, you never know if you don't try. And John selected at the 109 Jeremy Bernard. So he's a Alabama wide receiver going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he was pretty highly on my list of available players here as well. Just because going in the second round, early second or mid second round to the Steelers, Jeremy Bernard, he just offers something where he's versatile enough. He'll probably play more of an underneath type of role, complement what a DK Metcalf can do, but he should be a primary target within that offense. And we know what the Pittsburgh Steelers have done overall drafting at the wide receiver position. They've done a pretty good job through the years. And I think they found a very solid player. He's not the most remarkable, the most explosive, or fantastic wide receiver that you will see out there, but I think at the end of the day, Jeremy Bernard can be a solid player. And you think of what Mike McCarthy's primary slot receiver has done in top 10 finishes. Well, that's 7 of the last 13 seasons that he has had a primary slot receiver finished in top 10 in all fantasy football. So you're thinking, okay, well maybe Jeremy Bernard actually does become that full-time slot wide receiver. We've seen some really good seasons, and even in those down years, it was like a Dak Prescott injury year, and there was a couple other extenuating circumstances. So I think there's certainly some upside with me, but it's more of a safe pick, honestly, at this point in the draft. And like John said, it is a tier break.
Yes, it is a massive, massive tier break. I don't like Jeremy Bernard. I've always been on the record. From a yards per route run standpoint, he's gross. Under 2 for his entire career. I don't know that he's a slot receiver either. Like, he can play the slot, but it's not like what he did primarily. It seems like they're going to probably slot him in there. I know they got Michael Pittman playing there as well. So with him and DK Metcalf, I feel like they're going to be the solid top 2 targets for that team. And beyond that, how much is left for Jeremy Bernard, getting passes from the 500-year-old Aaron Rodgers or whoever they slot in there at Pittsburgh to be their quarterback. But the tier break is just so massive. I don't know that I wouldn't do it. I'll just say I wouldn't do it. There's certainly somebody else at 109 that I would have held in higher regard, who looks like he'll still be there for me at 111, because at 110, John went with Elijah Surratt, which is probably going to surprise a lot of people, just based on his draft capital. He went in the 4th round, and it's escaping me who he got drafted to. The Ravens, another gross landing spot for wide receivers. But talent-wise, I think all of us would say he's right there with Omar Cooper. Plays a little bit of a different style game, but the fact that he's consistently been, at lower competition, but he's always been this dominant force as a wide receiver. So it was a little bit shocking to see him slide on draft day. He's obviously going to Baltimore, presumably behind Flowers. Presumably, he's going to be behind in the pecking order to whoever's playing tight end there. But I feel like Surratt is one of those guys where you have to. It's going to be hard to click the button just because you see he got drafted in the 4th round. But this class is just so disgusting. Like, this is the type of time where you look back and say like, oh my goodness, Amon-Ra St. Brown was available at the end of the second. I can't even believe it. And then, now he's a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. I'm not saying that's what Surratt's future is, but with this draft class, like you might be getting a solid top 24 season finisher in Elijah Surratt. That's within his range of outcomes at the end of the first year, which I don't, with some of the other names that we're going to be potentially talking about here, I can't say that I'm mad at Elijah Surratt at 110. It's just good. It's going to go against ADP quite a bit. I'll just say that.
Yeah, it will go against ADP, absolutely. And like John, he just said in the chat, in his defense, like you won't have to take Surratt at 110, but if you can't move back, he says don't be scared to. And for me, I think I agree. Like you don't have to take him this early. And for me as well, I will say like Elijah Surratt, he was drafted in the 4th round by the Baltimore Ravens, and so was Jacoby Lane, actually drafted in the 3rd round, another wide receiver going out of USC. And they're kind of filling similar roles. Like they are ultimately outside guys, and both a little bit more contested catch. I mean, they play slightly. Um, well, they're not completely similar from a stylistic standpoint, but at the end of the day, they're going to play similar positions. They're going to play those outside wide receiver roles, try to get some jump balls, back shoulder fades, be a red zone threat. And I actually like Jacoby Lane a fair amount. I mean, I don't think that we saw his ceiling by any means those 3 years that he played at USC. If he would have stayed for a 4th, 5th year, I think that we would have seen him do some excellent things like we've seen Elijah Surratt go on to do. So, yeah, for me, Surratt has just always been a little bit limited from an athletic standpoint. But at the same time, I mean, there are some promising things to his profile from a production standpoint. So I just also look at the offense. They end up in a low volume passing attack, cannibalizing each other for targets after like Zay Flowers and the tight ends there, or at least Andrews there. It's tough at this point in the draft. It is probably not the player I was gonna eye up there, but I'm curious to see who Andy gets here. And it's John's guy too. If I will say, if Elijah Surratt hits, it is 100% John's right to victory lap that and put that up on the fridge, because that is a call.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and take the tight end off the board here. My tight end 1, who's not going to be the tight end that everybody expects, but it's going to be Eli Stowers, going to Philadelphia as a 2nd round pick. Obviously Kenyon Sadiq was the 1st round tight end that went off the board, but his issues are no secret to anyone that listens to our pod. For me anyway. And Eli Stowers has just been a dominant force for Vanderbilt for 2 seasons now. A little bit older, obviously, but with the tight end, you're not so concerned about that sort of thing. I do think that eventually he takes over for Dallas Goedert, who, Dallas Goedert's been a solid tight end in this league for nearly a decade. If he can emulate that success, even 90%, which I think he's more than capable of, then you're going to be happy with that pick at the end of the 1st round. So I'll take Eli Stowers. It might take a year or 2 to really pay off, but I think he's going to be a solid player for many years.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you with Stowers. Like he is going to be the heir apparent there, and assuming that he can get some decent snaps, getting on the field, capable enough as a blocker, because that is the question with him. Like, is he a good enough blocker to be an NFL tight end? Probably doesn't matter. They want him out there in those passing situations, and they'll find a variety of roles for him to get out there as a bigger target. So, yeah, from a year 1 standpoint, I don't love the Stowers production that he's probably going to bring, to your point, but how many year 1 tight ends are you relying on in your starting lineup? And the answer should be very few. Like the Harold Fannons of the world are rare, and you know what? Maybe there's injuries or something else that happens in Philadelphia. They're going to trade AJ Brown, it seems. So there's a potential, and we know that Dallas Goedert he's had a solid career, but his injuries come up almost every year. So it is likely that we see some Eli Stowers this season, and selecting him in the early second, like, Philadelphia wants to use him ideally, and he's a very, very solid athlete, like one of the most athletic guys ever. Besides Kenyon Sadiq, who's also in this class. And that's who I'm going to take here at 112. Thank you guys for letting one of the most athletic tight ends we've ever seen at the NFL level drop to me, who went in the first round of the draft. And he is one of those guys where his usage was underneath. I understand the concerns from an analytical standpoint. In 3 seasons, Kenyon Sadiq did not necessarily do what he needed to do. And down the stretch, he faded this last year. But if you take most of the tight ends who come out to the NFL level, usually they're doing it in like 4 or 5 seasons. And Kenyon Sadiq, he was only in his 3rd season coming out. There would have been a lot of growth there, and development from a route running standpoint, a down the field deployment standpoint, etc. If he was in a slightly different system and or different, further years along within his development. So I am pretty confident here that Kenyon Sadiq can carve out a very meaningful role there for the New York Jets. Now, it's a gross landing spot. Going 16th overall in the NFL draft to the New York Jets. We've already talked about it, so we don't have to get into that whole situation thing again, but he is clearly the most talented tight end in that room, and he should be able to get out on the field in a variety of roles, whether it's the slot, whether it's in line, and that athleticism, it's just a shame that he was utilized the way he was at Oregon, but it makes a lot of sense that Jamari Johnson was going to be more that down the field type of tight end and, field stretching guy versus Kenyon Sadiq. He was so effective in those underneath routes and roles, but you see on film, if you actually watch Kenyon Sadiq play, he can win down the field when you ask him to. It's just, it wasn't asked a lot, and he has the athleticism to back that up.
Yeah, I mean, I can't be upset at you getting Sadiq at 112 here. It's probably who I would have went with as well after all these other guys. I maybe would have put him above Surratt just because of the draft capital as well. I probably would have put him above Surratt. I think but I understand what John was doing. Yeah, Sadiq, the issue for me is always going to be yards per route run as well. In addition to the market share, which was not great. No first round tight ends with under 2 yards per route run for their career without even having a season of 2 yards per route run have ever done very well long term. Obviously, none of them were the athletic freaks that Kenyon Sadiq was. So we'll see, whether the analytics wins or the film wins with Sadiq in the long run. It'll be kind of fun to watch. But go, Aaron, you're up here again at 201.
Absolutely. And why don't we do just a quick recap on the drafts thus far? I can take us through. But going from 101 all the way through the end of the first, we have Jeremiah Love at 101, Jordan Tyson, wide receiver, at 102, Carnell Tate, wide receiver, at 103, Fernando Mendoza, quarterback, at 104. At 105, Mekhi Lemon went. Then at 106, it was wide receiver Casey Concepcion. That was at 106. 107 was Jadarian Price, running back. 108 was Omar Cooper Jr., wide receiver. 109 was Jeremy Bernard, wide receiver. At 110, it was Elijah Surratt, wide receiver. At Eli Stowers was selected at 111, and he's a tight end going to Philadelphia. And 112 was tight end going to the New York Jets, Kenyon Sadiq. So, and John says Sadiq is going to be so good in like 5 years. And I also agree that if they can get some good quarterback play there, he should be really, really good in future. He's going to take a little bit of time, I think, but that's true of the whole New York Jets offense, in my opinion. But I am up at the 201, and I do not like this slot. I didn't mind the, maybe 109, 110, 111, because I could still go to the tight end position if I wanted to. But man, I am stuck here, and I'm not going to lie. You could reach for some running backs that went in day 3. Don't always love doing that, right? They're not great bets, even if their situations are solid. You could go the round 1 quarterback route, but this is terrible. I mean, like, Ty Simpson going to the Rams. Like he's gonna have to wait a year. We don't even know if Ty Simpson's good. I mean, basically everything that he's done in college is telling us he's not that good. Like potential upside someday, maybe if Sean McVay wants to play him, or maybe he wants Stetson Bennett as the backup because Sean McVay did not want Ty Simpson there. So I don't know what's going to happen there for LA Rams, but it doesn't make me want to select Ty Simpson and reach there. So I'm going to go a different direction here, and I'm going to draft a running back. I think a running back of the future for the Tennessee Titans, Nick Singleton, running back who is the all-time leader for Penn State. Not Saquon Barkley, not some of those other talented running backs at Penn State, but Nick Singleton, the all-time leader there in rushing touchdowns, and he might, I don't know if it's for yards as well, but he was a guy who unfortunately never quite lived up to that pedigree, coming out just as an awesome size-adjusted athlete. He dealt with an injury this offseason, which didn't allow him to test and really tanked his stock. I mean, there was probably some taking of his stock from this last season as well. Like he is a guy who flashed really well as a freshman, gave us everything that we wanted to see, and then really never took that step forwards. So this last year, unfortunately, in 2025, he just was not 100%. It seemed like there was just something going on where he was not as effective as in previous years. So Nick Singleton, he is one of those guys where you're just banking on the traits, you're just banking on the opportunity there. But we talked about Carnell Tate going early in this draft at the 103. Nick Singleton in the second round. I'm just going to start taking swings on guys who have awesome athletic traits at the running back position and maybe shaky long-term or even short-term depth charts. Like Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard, like they're fine for now, but long-term, I could see Singleton being a big-time playmaker. But he did break his foot ultimately, and his vision has never been as strong as his teammates, Katron Allen. The thing I'll say about that is those guys, I think Katron Allen was the perfect fit for that Penn State system, and I don't know that Nick Singleton really was. So, going into a different system at the NFL level, I think the Tennessee Titans, is it DeBall, who's there at the OC coordinator, I think now for the Tennessee Titans, and I think he can get something nice offensively out of Singleton. But it's a projection, right? It could be a huge time bust. I mean, this is a very boom or bust type of pick.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have much to add to what you said. You just hope that he can get healthy inside of an NFL training room. And there is obviously that running back room with a lot of question marks for the years to come. So potentially a great spot for him to land. But at 202, I am gonna do that thing you just talked about with Ty Simpson and just because I was in a similar situation. I don't know what to do here. So when I don't know what to do, we're in the second round. I'm gonna take a first round draft capital quarterback. There's one of two ways this could go. It's either going to be Ty Simpson sitting for 2 years and having like a Jordan Love level career, or Ty Simpson is Paxton Lynch, drafted in the first round and never does a damn thing his entire career. I don't know. I guess you want to see that Jordan Love season, but you're going to have to wait probably 2 whole seasons before you get to see anything. Because it doesn't seem like Stafford's coming off an MVP, and he's not slowing down. He's got his weapons there. He's got Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams. I know there's been talks of trades. I don't think there's going to be someone else that they slot in for Stafford at some point if they do move on from Devontae. But as long as Puka Nacua is there, Stafford's going to be happy. That's like his safety net. He peppers that guy with targets. So I don't think Stafford's going anywhere as long as they keep him protected, which, I think they will. But I don't know what to do, so I'm going to take Ty Simpson in the second just because he's a first-round quarterback. There's other guys that people are probably pounding the table here for right now. Maybe they were pounding the table for us to take Ty Simpson 6 picks ago because he is that first-round quarterback, and this is super flex. But he's just he's a bit of a gross prospect, unfortunately. So.
Got nothing to add there. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll wait on John's pick here. He's at 203. He put gross, obvious. Oh, and he takes Mike Washington, who I contemplated because he's obviously for me the next best running back to come off the board. Mike Washington, also a day 3 pick, unfortunately, because there was only 3 running backs taken on days 1 and 2. Mike Washington, he went all the way to pick 122 in the 4th round of the Raiders, and I jokingly said he was going to steal Genty's job in our group chat, but I don't think that's going to happen. But it could be more of a committee than maybe people want to admit. Kind of like that Zach Charbonnet KW2 split that Kubiak was accustomed to at Seattle. So, if you're getting Mike Washington, who's getting, let's say, 8 to 10 touches a game, I think you're pretty happy with that at 203.
Yeah, I get the pick. Like, he's a handcuff in the situation that Janty does go down. He could have a nice workload, and the athleticism is there. I've always had some qualms with him, like his production profile. Like, why did he not do anything at the G5 level for like 4 years, and then finally at the SEC level beat up on younger kids and whatnot just because he's a great athlete? Like, that to me doesn't scream promising profile at all. But in this draft, and in a clear second string capacity there, I mean, he could go off, and they invested in him a little bit more than, for example, the Titans invested in Singleton, because Mike Washington went in the 4th. Nick Singleton, who I just took here in the early 2nd, went in the 5th. So again, not like the most strong draft capital by any means with those guys. I am curious who John is going to go with here next after Mike Washington at the 204. Oh, and pick is off the board. Chris Bell at 204, which, I mean, I actually don't mind that either. Like, that's a boomer bust one, and that's a theme in this round, right? Really, like, they could be nothing at all, or they could be pretty solid. And we know that Chris Bell coming off an ACL, there's that wild card component to his profile, but he's a very athletic wide receiver coming out of Louisville who he didn't really fully put it together until this season. And even then, I still want to see more out of him at the wide receiver position, especially from a development standpoint. But that's just such a wide open room. Like, somebody's going to need to catch some passes. And in the first half of the season, I don't know if we're going to see a lot of Chris Bell, but down the stretch, I do think we'll see some flashes enough to really make dynasty managers say, ooh, yeah, there's a reason I drafted this guy. There's some optimism going into it. I just kind of worry if he never gets any solid footing there, if he just gets drafted over and free agents sign there next year, and whatever the case is at Miami.
Yeah, this feels like a pick that Miami made for 2027 season because of that injury. And they've got Malik Willis there, who definitely feels like a Band-Aid quarterback situation. This might just be a full-on tank year for Miami. So maybe they're thinking, we'll take Chris Bell on day 2 to, if they do what you're saying, draft over him or sign somebody big in 2027. I think he's still far and away the most talented wide receiver that they have on this roster right now. I mean, you look at the guy, you got like Kevin Coleman and Samari Traore. These aren't people that are going to be long-term dynasty assets by any means. So yeah, I like the pick at 204. Chris Bell, he's a guy that I mentioned that I was kind of wrong on. It was unfortunate that he did get injured, but we're in this such a gross part of this draft that there's really nothing you can say about it. That makes sense. But that's me now at 205. I'm going to go with somebody I didn't think I was going to draft, but I just don't know who else to take here. So I'm going to take a wide receiver as well. This was a day 2 wide receiver. He went, I want to say in the 2nd round, maybe the 3rd. But Malachi Fields went to the Giants on day 2. And he had a really great season for Virginia a couple of years ago. And I was excited about him. Went to Notre Dame. The raw production kind of took a step back, but he improved on a per route basis. So to me, there was steps forward. He's kind of, he's going to be like a traditional X receiver because he's such a big-bodied guy at 6'4", 220. It'll be a nice pairing with Malik Neighbors once he eventually gets healthy. Just potential red zone threat for Jackson Dart. I think that adds another element to their offense that they were probably missing this year. So Malachi Fields, yeah, he's never going to be the wide receiver one for even on his own team, but he could certainly like be a guy that is a reliable flex for you on a week to week basis.
Yeah, the Giants certainly ended up investing fairly heavily there in Malachi Fields in the early third round. So I like it, and John likes it as well. He's saying that he really likes the Fields pick overall. And for me, I think the issue is the contested catch rate for him is just so high. Like I want to criticize Elijah Surratt. Well, this guy's worse about that. So at the end of the day, JJ Arcega-Whiteside is the only guy who is in that same ballpark as Malachi Fields and such a high contested catch rate in guys who have been drafted at least within the first 5 rounds of the NFL draft. So, yeah, that's pretty insane. I think at the end of the day, Malachi Fields, like you said, could carve out a role, but I think it's better for a guy like a Jackson Dart versus better compared to our fantasy teams. I don't think it's going to translate into consistent, startable production from a week to week standpoint. I just don't know that the upside is there, in my opinion, just with some of the struggles he's had as a player. I don't know. I mean, again, this is counting stats, so take it for what it's worth, like within the offenses he's been in, but I'm pretty sure he's never cleared like 815 receiving yards or whatever in a season. So like you said, there are some questions for sure within the profile, but at this rate, you got to do what you got to do. I actually like the second half of this second round more than I like the first half, if that makes any sense, because I'm so used to taking like, 201, I still like that pick. 202, oh yeah, it could be solid. It felt just gross once you got into the second round here. It continues to be gross, but at least it doesn't feel as bad because taking guys at the 206, 207, it doesn't hurt as bad to take a mid player in this range. And I'm going to take a mid player that I think has ultimately some upside within the offense this year. And I think that's going to be Chris Brazzell the second, going to the Carolina Panthers. So he got pretty solid draft capital there going in the third round. And Chris Brazzell, he's got some weaknesses for sure within his game, but he's a 6'4", 198-pound wide receiver. Like him and Ted are just going to be threats on the outside there. And he was first team all SEC, and he's honestly kind of a sneaky, smooth type of guy. He's not your typical wide receiver there at Tennessee that just bolts down the field, runs those 9 routes. He actually had some nuance, some route running chops, and I know Andy had shouted Brazzell out at some point as a guy who has a decent enough profile. It's not great by any means, but he started his career at Tulane, and his first year at Tennessee was kind of a wash, but this last year he really did have a nice season, considering that he was dealing with some inconsistencies at the quarterback position as well. So again, not the maybe wide receiver one on his own team, but I think that there's more there for him as a player compared to maybe like the Malachi Fields of the world. So go Chris Brazzell, and then the next pick at 207. I'm kind of torn on this because there's a few different routes I could go, but I'll go with the safety, a guy who could take over that same role that Deebo Samuel filled last year, and that's Antonio Williams going to the Washington Commanders. So Antonio Williams actually was an underrated athlete from a testing standpoint in this draft, pre-draft process. So I was actually surprised to see that. And he had to contend with very talented wide receivers in TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco Jr., which people will get to know this next year because those are both very talented wide receivers when healthy for Clemson. So the Antonio Williams, at the end of the day, we've criticized Antonio Williams on this podcast, but he is a slot receiver who should be able to fill a very nice role for the Washington Commanders. That's particularly attractive in more PPR formats, but at the end of the day, he should be able to command a large target share. Who else are we thinking is going to command targets from Jaden Daniels there? Like Terry McLaurin, he's going on 31 years old, I believe, and he is not getting any younger or any healthier after that. I see a lot of opportunity for Antonio Williams, who is an underrated slot wide receiver. From an athletic standpoint, from a route running standpoint, he can do it all. He just needs to be healthy, because that's the criticism at the end of the day is his analytical profile, at least on this podcast that we've criticized. But part of that has been health. He's been banged up a little bit, and that has hurt his production long term. So Antonio Williams, 207.
Yeah, I like both of those picks. I was contemplating Brazil, who you mentioned that I talked about him probably during our last rookie draft, where I took him towards the end of the first in a similar situation. Yeah, obviously, we didn't know landing spots then, but yeah, I did like Brazil. He had a great season last year, and he did have that also solid season his sophomore year at Tulane. Antonio Williams, I think you covered everything that I wanted to say about him. And here at the end of the second, anything goes, right? So, and speaking of anything goes, I'm going to go with a guy that I didn't know that I would be drafting at all prior to a few days ago. And that's Eli Raridan, the tight end from Notre Dame. A lot of Notre Dame guys getting drafted, honestly, more than I expected. That's 4 of them that we've already called. Um, Great, a good yard on a per route basis last year, over 2, which is it's tough to see that with the power 4 tight ends. I know the raw numbers weren't there. He didn't quite reach 500 receiving yards on the year. He's had some injury issues, I believe, earlier on in his career. So this maybe was like the first season that he was truly healthy, and it was a good one. And he's getting day 2 draft capital, and he's going to New England. Yeah, 2 ACL tears. Think John is telling me from backstage. He is still here. You just can't see or hear him. This is great, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, but yeah, he's going to go to the Patriots, who tend to we've seen what they've done with Hunter Henry over the years. It's just been a solid position in dynasty. It's never like a difference maker, but it's somebody who could fill that spot if he does end up getting that starting role for New England, which I think he absolutely could do.
Yeah, they need receiving help for sure in New England from Drake May. I don't mind that pick at all. Raridan he's kind of figured it out from a health standpoint, but we'll see. I mean, that's just such a dicey medical history that it's hard to have any sort of confidence, right, with him producing. But you could say that for a lot of players here. So let's see who John takes. Carson Beck, wide receiver. And okay, so I told Ram, who is a guy that John and I have played dynasty football, fantasy football with for years, that we would cover Carson Beck because he went in the third round, I believe, to the Arizona Cardinals. And that's kind of surprising draft capital, but they don't have a long-term quarterback. Like, he went first overall in the third round. Yeah. So I mean, he's not a perfect player by any means, but he's been in a lot of different kind of almost pro style systems, and he's had success, right? He's won plenty of games between his time at Georgia, then his time at Miami this last year. So he's kind of a weird dude, whether you like him as a person, a personality, you're poking fun at him for his looks, whatever. He can be a functional quarterback at the NFL level. Jacoby Brissett, holds out, wants more money, gets banged up, plays poorly. All those things are possible. Carson Beck could come in and start some meaningful games this season for the Cardinals. And we already said earlier, the weapons that he's going to be playing with, that's pretty juicy. It's pretty enticing. I don't think any one of us are just going to bang the table for Carson Beck as a big time, long time NFL prospect. But I do think we all realize there's at least a solid enough situation there. The team obviously is very interested in him, and he can do just enough to maybe start some games at the NFL level. He's just not going to be able to elevate and probably keep a job long term.
Yeah, I get the pick, right? It's a super flex league. It seems like he's got a decent opportunity, and at 210, the pick is in. John's going with Jonah Coleman, who did finally get his name called on day 3. I know the Jonah Coleman hive was a little bit down on their luck after the first 2 days of the draft, but he does go to the Broncos, where I don't think anyone's solidified that RJ Harvey is going to be the guy at Denver. So there is some question marks in the backfield for who can take over. I don't really have many nice things to say about Jonah Coleman, but he had that great season at Arizona. Never really got it to click in Washington, unfortunately. But he's a capable receiver. He just doesn't have that top end, take the 80 yards to the house that you love to see in your running backs, especially for fantasy. But if Sean Payton decides that he wants to give this guy the ball like he did with J.K. Dobbins last year, uh, 20 times a game, then yeah, absolutely. I think that just getting that piece of an offense would be valuable. And we're at the back end of the second here. The guys we're calling are not anybody to be, thrilled about. So I get it. I think at this point, Jonah Coleman makes sense. And I can just go ahead and rattle off my 211. Oh, I'm between two guys that I don't want to draft yet again. Um, Maybe I'll just take a shot in the dark, like on a guy that might actually do something. Um, Now, I'll keep it. I'll keep it kind of believable, I guess, and I'll take. Geez, I guess I'll go with Deshaun Stribling from the Niners, just based on that draft capital.
Wow.
The question marks at the wide receiver position. I don't like Stribling. I'll just say that, but he did have a decent enough year last year. Going for he's had back-to-back seasons with over 800 yards and over 2 yards per route run. So it's not a guy that I'm dead set against, but he's never really put together this incredible season that I'm gonna ever be excited about. But he's going into an offense that really doesn't have. Did they get Mike Evans? I think they signed Mike Evans, or is that a different team that I'm thinking of?
49ers signed Mike Evans.
Okay, so you expect Evans to probably be the wide receiver one there this year. But beyond that, I don't think there's anyone else on that roster that you're really thrilled about. I know that people will bring up who's the guy they took in the first from Florida a few years ago. He's still there.
Ricky Pearsall, still
Yeah.
gonna. Yeah, I mean, I think between Evans and Pearsall, those guys should still be able to command a lot of targets. But Pearsall hasn't been healthy either. Though it doesn't look like he's looking to get shot again here this year. But
Right.
hopefully not.
Yeah. No, I don't love the pick, but it's just one I had to make.
No, I totally get it. And I just, too much PTSD going back to, I already, 49ers, any 49ers fans listening to this podcast are just going to automatically stop listening here in the future. I don't want that, but we also have to be very realistic here. And we see that Jordan Watkins, Ole Miss wide receiver that they selected last year in the draft, didn't really get much playing time and success. And you go back to some of the other reaches that they've had, like Jalen Hurd. He went in, the third round the other year? Dante Pettis in the second round. Like you said, Ricky Pearsall, I guess he's been all right, but he needs to be healthy, and I think if he is healthy, that's a roadblock for Stribling, unfortunately. But Stribling's also done some solid things, like in his second and third seasons in college. So I get that there's some flashes that he has displayed there, and honestly, I don't think you look at the competition last year for Ole Miss, they had some interesting guys between true freshman talent, Winnie Watkins, and then they also had Deuce Alexander, and I forget the other guy that was there, in addition to Stribling. So it was a deep wide receiver core last year. I just would have liked to see more separation for Stribling amongst that group. And then just going back to Jonah Coleman, I do like that pick that John had. I honestly would take Jonah Coleman in the second, early second here. If I didn't take Nick Singleton at the 201 there, I would have even considered Jonah Coleman in the early second. So make no doubt that Jonah Coleman belongs somewhere in the second round range. It just depends where you're comfortable drafting that guy for the Denver Broncos. And then probably waiting, because J.K. Dobbins has $8 million guaranteed this season. They signed him to another contract. And then they got R.J. Harvey there still, which I think that they like R.J. Harvey. They just don't love him. And they want to have some options there. So I think when Dobbins does eventually, go bye-bye and leaves the team or gets cut or whatever the case is, probably after this season, then it could be the Jonah Coleman in that type of role. Because if they just don't trust R.J. Harvey to have a big-time workload, then let's go with the next guy. But to cap this draft off at the 212, I have to go with a Devy Devotional favorite, Denzel Boston, wide receiver for Washington. And I say that kind of joking that he hasn't been one of our favorites, but at the same time, Denzel Boston he is what he is. Like he's a big wide receiver who can command some targets for the Cleveland Browns, who was drafted in the very early second round of the NFL draft. And he lands in a spot with open opportunity, and he is, I think he's an underwhelming athlete, honestly, but he plays strong, and he can do some nice things getting the ball up in the air. I think he can adjust to some poorly thrown passes, which you're going to see from the quarterbacks there in Cleveland. So nice, I guess, with that ability. And so Denzel Boston could be at least a starter right away for Cleveland on the outside and in the early second round. I mean, you have to draft him somewhere here in the second, I would think. He won't be going likely quite this late in your rookie drafts, but just a guy to consider here as a solid enough wide receiver considering the options we're looking at. I am curious here before we maybe recap this if John or Andy has any other guys they want to shout out that they really, thought deserved a shout out that just couldn't quite squeeze them into their draft.
I mean, I wish we could have drafted less guys, if I'm being honest. But no, I think the name that probably people are going to bring up the most is Ted Hurst, potentially. Another day two guy that was getting a lot of love towards the end of the draft cycle before the draft. Maybe Drew Aller going to that weird Pittsburgh quarterback situation. And Zachariah Branch is probably the biggest name that people are probably going to wonder where he's at. But his issues are a known commodity amongst us. He's a one-dimensional guy. He only operates behind the line of scrimmage. John mentioned Brennan Thompson. I also considered Brennan Thompson. That's who I was going to potentially plant my flag with at 211. But again, a fourth round guy. He kind of just seems like he's a deep threat. If he can, do that consistently in the NFL, that might be a great situation for him. But maybe not somebody that I was ready to pull the trigger on. And then Jacoby Lane is another guy. Just in a weird situation. I'm not sure that I wanted to, stake a second round pick on that yet either. And then Kalen Black is also a guy who got day two draft capital. But again, that weird Niner situation. He's just, if you saw any draft coverage at all, you knew that was a big reach. So, if you're just trying to bet on talent, that's not the guy that you want to do it with, unfortunately. He seems more like a fourth round guy in rookie drafts, but he's probably going to get overdrafted.
Yeah, those are fair names. I mean, I think Brennan Thompson's a little bit buried there, but I mean, you could say the same thing for Kalen Black too. But the draft capital, at least for Black, strong enough there. Maybe he gets a shot. But I think Max Clare, tight end from Ohio State, he has some interesting aspects to his profile, and going to the Los Angeles Rams on day two, that was very interesting. I was surprised, I guess, that the Rams decided to draft another tight end highly after they did so last year with Ferguson. And, I don't know ultimately long term, like if they just don't like Ferguson or if they just saw Claire as like way too talented, like they need both of those guys. But I think that nukes both of their values a little bit, or at least limits it. Justin Jolly, John, I'm surprised he didn't mention him, or maybe he meant to mention him. But going to the Denver Broncos, that's interesting long term. Not the most athletic guy overall, but a very solid tight end, and especially a receiving option at the tight end position, which we know that Sean Payton can utilize for sure. And then another favorite of the Devy Devotional, Emmett Johnson, landing as a running back there from Nebraska, landing on the Kansas City Chiefs. And so while we don't love the talent himself that Emmett Johnson brings to the table in the fifth round as that handcuff there for Kansas City, he's a must-draft guy more in the third round range just because of the potential volume that will happen in the system there if there is some injury, for example, with Kenneth Walker. But I think we shouted out the names we needed to, like maybe a Katron Allen running back going to Washington Commanders could be interesting. Getting a shot at some starting reps and whatnot in camp and down the stretch in the season. So though he's not the most explosive guy ever, I think the landing spot really saved Katron Allen. And he was the guy who I drafted Nick Singleton earlier because of the traits. Well, Katron Allen, he maybe lacks some of those really, really high-end athletic traits, but he's a solid back overall. And we know that sometimes when there's opportunity and a guy's a solid enough back and opportunity comes available, they can put up some numbers, even if it's a one-year type of thing. I think Katron makes a lot of sense there later in drafts as well as a sleeper.
Yeah, another guy that John always brings up is Eli Heidenreich, who is going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Uh, Good athlete. Obviously, he's coming from the Service Academy, so his numbers are a little bit weird for me. And he played wide receiver. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but that's another backfield that's kind of a lot of question marks. You don't know who's going to rise at the top there. So another potential third round dart throw. But I think that generally covers the 2026 NFL rookie class, which I'll be happy to be done with this one.
Yeah, like we said earlier, it's kind of a fun class when you're talking like the earlier first round or even getting into the middle first round, but definitely starts to drop off. And so if you see some specific drop off points where you can navigate with some trades, take advantage of that and try to make some moves. I certainly will try to do some in my dynasty leagues themselves. And yeah, enjoy some of the interesting landing spots. There are some sleepers, so it's not all doom and gloom. Like there's guys that I would still draft here in the third round. I'm not just trying to trade away these picks for nothing, but yeah, it's not the most promising class by any means. Not the best high end depth or low end depth, but there's opportunity. I like the Drew LR shout out as well, QB for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's got a ton of traits that are interesting, but he's never put it together. Injury, derailed his season most recently, and I just he's a big time projection. I don't know if he'll ever even see meaningful snaps for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but with a quarterback need there, I kind of like him. So I'm glad that he got a shout out. So any words of wisdom, Andy?
We're on to 2027. I don't really have anything else wise to add about this class. But I am excited to do John's sign out catchphrase, which maybe Aaron wants to do it, but I can do it. And I don't know if John's backstage where he can hit the outro music for us, but that was 2026. I think we covered it all. It was fun. We're gonna probably shift back to Devy next week when we'll be back in your ears. But for now, we're gonna cash out. We'll see you guys later.